For joining us. This is the first in the series of political forums about public safety hosted by Melrose Action. My name is Liz Bronstein. I'm a longtime resident of CD5 and the Melrose area, and I'm on the board of Melrose Action. And I can't remember why I agreed to host this, but here I am. So tonight we're here with all 6 candidates, which is amazing. We did not expect that. All 6 who are running for city council for CD5. So welcome all. A few words about tonight's event, 90 minutes long. We're going to start with brief introductions. Then I'll ask a series of questions. The candidates will have 2 minutes to answer. And we got a lightning round. And then I'll ask questions submitted by the audience. Many of you responded to our email to send questions ahead of time, which I really appreciate. And then you can put questions in the Q&A. We've turned off the chat for this, so we can all focus on the candidates and not arguing with each other, which has happened in previous forums. I will do my best to ask as many questions as possible, but there's just no way with 6 candidates we're going to get through all questions. But I just want to remind everybody that these candidates really want to share their platforms and their opinions and their thoughts with you. So if you have a question that didn't get asked tonight, reach out to them on their websites directly and ask them. You know, we can only ask so many questions. So tonight's topic is public safety, and we're really going to stay limited to that topic. There can be lots of forums about other topics, but we're going to stick to this one tonight. And I just want to say a word about homelessness, because it's such a difficult and complicated topic. We could spend all night talking about just that, but I don't want to do that. There was another forum a couple of months ago with 4 of these candidates talking about homelessness. You can reach out to them directly. So we're going to limit it to 1 or 2 questions about homelessness, so we can get lots of topics. Okay, so let's get started. Here are some stats to kick off a light romp of an evening. Let's look at some crime stats. Citywide in LA, since 2019, homicides are up 45%. Car theft is up 52%. Shooting victims, 53%. In the Wilshire district alone, homicides are up 1,200%. Aggravated assaults, 23%. Car theft, just in Wilshire, 71%. And shooting victims are up 22% just in this neighborhood. And listen, we're all watching the news, and we're seeing brazen daytime robberies and smash and grabs at the Grove and home invasions. So this is why we're having this forum. So I'm going to start with Sam, and I'm going to start with a question that will surprise no one. So if elected, what will you do to increase public safety and lower the crime rates in CD5?
Thanks, Liz. Are we starting with opening statements or straight into the questions?
Oh my gosh, my mistake. Totally forgot. We're going to dial this back, and we're going to start with each candidate telling us about themselves.
Sure. Well, thank you, Liz. Hello, everyone. My name is Sam Yebri, and I'm running for Los Angeles City Council because the city that I love, that enabled my family to live the American dream, where I'm raising 4 young kids, is broken. My parents and I arrived in Los Angeles when I was a year old as refugees from Iran, went to 3 local public schools in the district, went to Yale and USC for law school. 12 years ago, I was proud to become a small business owner myself, starting my own law firm here in the district, where I fought over the years for tenants and workers and individuals with disabilities. Over the last 15 years, I've served on numerous nonprofit boards and city commissions, including on a citywide gun violence prevention task force. Meanwhile, my wife and I and our 4 young kids have watched with horror as our city declined on every single issue: an explosion of homelessness, poverty, corruption, and of course, crime. City Hall has failed us on its most important duty, to keep every Angelino in every neighborhood safe. That's why I'm running for city council, to fight for the safe, vibrant city that we all deserve. And I'm committed to running a different type of campaign, one that puts communities and families first. And this includes rejecting money from special interests, including real estate developers and corporate money. It's time for new, serious leadership. Our campaign will bring the fresh perspectives and the courage that we need to change the status quo.
That was the timer. Okay, Katie?
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. My name is Katie Young-Yaroslavsky. I'm an environmental attorney, a policymaker, and a mom to 3 young kids. The oldest is 6.5 and the baby's just 16 months. I'm running because I want LA to be a place where we can all thrive, but we need effective, ethical, and proven leadership to make that happen. I know I can make a difference. I have a track record of making a difference. I spent 10 years in the private sector as an attorney and the general counsel of a climate change nonprofit. And for the last 6 years, I've been making policy for LA County's 10 million people as a senior policy advisor to County Supervisor Sheila Kuehl, where I created one of our region's largest jobs in infrastructure programs and served as our interim public health deputy during the initial months of COVID. My priorities on the council are to reduce the inflow into homelessness and create faster and more flexible housing options, to improve our quality of life, with public safety being top of mind and a critical component of that, and to make LA more climate resilient and healthier. The recent rise in crime over the last 20 months and real concerns about public safety are absolute priorities for me. All of us have a right to be safe in our communities, and I'm committed to using the council office to make our communities safer. More importantly, I think city government as a whole needs to make our communities safer. Public safety is the #1 job of government. I have a record of creating coalitions and problem solving using the tools of government and working in partnerships with community. It's why I have the support of a broad coalition of electeds and community leaders, including Congresswoman Karen Bass, State Senators Ben Allen, Henry Sturden, Sidney Comlager, my boss, Supervisor Kuehl, and hundreds of civic and business leaders. They know me to be someone who gets stuff done, brings people together, and problem solves. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to meet you tonight. Thank you.
Thanks. We'd love to hear from Christina.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. Nice to have you here. My name is Christina Irwin. My parents moved here from the former Republic of Yugoslavia, which was a communist country. And I came here luckily at the age of 3. And I myself am blessed with 3 kids. And my husband and I have lived here for a long time. And, you know, I decided to run. I'm not a politician. I'm not a career politician. I'm not an attorney. I am a real estate agent, work locally in the area, a commissioned notary, and a mom, obviously, with 3 kids. So the reason I'm running is because I'm sick and tired of our city looking like it does. I'm sick and tired of taking our kids to the park and seeing the mentally ill, you know, yelling at a tree and defecating on the streets. And it's just horrible. It shouldn't be like that, you know, and as a community, it breaks my heart, but also it's just not fair to everybody around us, including them. And I'm here to make a difference. And from the discretionary budget as a council member, I will fully fund programs that focus on addressing and resolving blight, including trash dumping, defecating on the streets, the homelessness, graffiti. I want to invite town halls, you know, have town halls, invite community members, groups to submit which areas have been neglected the longest and need the immediate attention of everybody. That's my goal as your future councilwoman. Thank you.
Thanks, Christina. Scott, we'd love to hear about you.
Thank you very much, Melrose Action, for hosting this forum. Melrose is very near and dear to my heart, as I lived directly adjacent to Melrose for 14 years. For 9 of those years, I was board member at Mid-City West Community Council, the neighborhood council that represents Melrose. And for 7 of those years, I was the chair of that council. I'm proud that under my leadership, Mid-City West partnered with Melrose stakeholder groups like Melrose Action, Melrose Bid, Greenway Arts Alliance, and many more on many different events and initiatives. And I'm proud to have the support of many residents, community leaders, and business owners in the area. I am a community leader and policy analyst, and I'm running for city council because I love this work. And I also believe that this moment requires elected officials who are connected to community and committed to progress. We have important work before us, whether it's making sure LA is affordable to all, building a sustainable city, or comprehensively addressing public safety. I don't believe our problems in LA stem from a lack of resources or good ideas or smart people. but rather from a lack of political will and skill in working with communities to build change. That's what I bring to the table, and I look forward to working with the Melrose community to solve our problems together. Thanks so much.
Fantastic, thank you. Jimmy, you're up.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. I'm Jimmy Biblars. I live with my partner, Harry, on Sweetser, which I think counts as the greater Melrose area, depending on who you ask. I grew up in Pico Robertson in the heart of Jewish LA and went to K through 12 public schools in CD5 and graduated from Hamilton High. I did my undergrad at Harvard and then my JD PhD there as well. My PhD research was laser focused on the rise of income and wealth inequality. I'm running to make LA a place where everyone can afford to thrive. As the cost of living has vastly outpaced wages, it gets harder and harder to live here every single year. And I'm running to do something about that. We have to get to the heart of the issues and start thinking structurally and proactively about what is causing our most pressing problems. The number one priority of all elected officials is public safety. The recent string of robberies in the Fairfax Melrose district is concerning, and that fear is very, very real. We need to think bigger than more police to get at the heart of this issue. We must grapple with the staggering costs of more aggressive policing and mass incarceration that have left millions of Americans with the mark of a criminal record, hindering their job and long-term outcomes. We must think about what is causing crime and intervene there proactively, rather than reactively addressing crime after it has already occurred. I have some ideas about how to tackle crime, thinking about developing a civilian office of neighborhood safety, about investing in more walkable streets and funding real anti-violence nonprofits that are on the ground doing the work of violence prevention. And I'm eager to hear all of your ideas. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Molly, you're up.
I'm a progressive Democrat. I'm running a grassroots campaign, people powered. I'm not taking any money from special interests. That means oil and gas, developers, pharmaceutical, anything that is harming the people or planet. I will not put profit before people. I'm running a green and regenerative campaign, so I'm trying to lead by example. It's not the speeches we make, but the actions we take. I am born and raised in Los Angeles. I've lived in the district for 20 years. I'm a climate reality leader trained by Al Gore, community organizer, activist, environmentalist, and a small business owner. And being born and raised in Los Angeles, I'm witnessing, as we all are, the demise of our beautiful city with this humanitarian crisis of the homelessness, a public health crisis with our brothers and sisters on the streets, and the lack of affordable housing, the climate crisis, and of course our unsafe neighborhoods, which is a public safety issue. And I want to be the new voice on the council. I want to be the voice of the people. I want to serve the people, not the people serving me. And I want to, bring a new voice of the people and protect the people of Los Angeles and District 5 and really make a difference. I am here to serve, and I look forward to speaking further on the issues of safety in our district. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, everybody. Now we can get to my questions, which are very important. So we want to start with Sam. What will you do to increase safety, decrease crime in CD5?
As a father of 4 young kids, nothing is more important to me than protecting my family. And similarly, there can be no higher priority for city government than protecting its citizens, especially at a time when gun and gang violence are skyrocketing and we see violent smash and grab and follow home robberies all throughout CD5 in every corner of our district. You mentioned these statistics. They're just startling. Homicides in the Wilshire division are up 1,200% from 2019. We had 1 murder in calendar year 2019. That means we had 13 this year already. It's shocking. Shootings are up 80% in the Wilshire division. Stolen cars are up 71%. What we have to do as a community is really come together and work with our law enforcement officials to talk about prevention and deterrence on the front end, and also holding accountable those criminals who are breaking the law and terrorizing our communities. So the first thing we do is, where crime is surging, such as the Melrose area, we need to allocate more police officers to patrol those neighborhoods. Councilmember Kretz deserves enormous credit for spending his office's discretionary funding on overtime for police officers on patrol to patrol Melrose. If it weren't for that, crime would be even worse on Melrose right now, and I pledge to do that and more. I also believe that tools such as license plate readers, video cameras, better lighting can be part of the response depending on the neighborhood. The city of San Jose just allocated money to do that as well there. But to free up police resources, we have to restructure police responsibilities. Instead of having them respond to mental health and homeless calls and babysitting, film production and traffic stops and noise complaints and crowd control, we need police officers to fight real crime. That's what they signed up to do. That's what they're trying to train to do, and they're willing to run into the line of fire to protect our families. And longer term, we have to reevaluate some of the factors that are leading to the surge in crime, including the proliferation of illegal, untraceable ghost guns. And the city council just passed an important ordinance to make that illegal. But also, there's some property crime and other laws that have policies that have had some unintended consequences that we need to talk about as well tonight.
Beautiful, thank you. Katie, same question. How do we get this public safety situation under control?
Sure. So as you noted at the beginning, we know that crime is up, and it reflects broader trends across the city and in big cities across the country. It's not just in LA, it's everywhere. And we all deserve to be safe in our communities. That means safe homes, safe streets, and safe businesses. And a well-staffed, well-trained, reformed police department is really an important piece of that. Making sure police officers are focused on crime prevention and solving crimes is key, freeing them up to do that work. They need to be well-funded and reformed for that to happen. As was mentioned, we need to reallocate and sort of reimagine what they're working on so they can really focus on what they went to the academy in the first place to do, which is crime prevention and solving crimes. We also know that more guns lead to more violence, and so we need to focus on strategies to get guns off the streets. There are some successful buyback programs. We also have a huge problem right now with ghost guns on the internet and so on. So we have a lot of work to do to get guns off the streets and start to make some headway there. There are strategies that the police are already taking in conjunction with our communities and in Council Office 5, like increasing the number of officers on patrol and increasing his visibility and presence and communicating what they're doing ahead of time to the broader public to try and prevent some of that crime from happening before it happens. More broadly speaking, though, public safety is about the fire department, and it's about EMD, the emergency management department. You know, EMD is woefully underfunded. I've looked at the EMD and I have real concerns over the preparedness of the city in the case of a natural disaster or God forbid, a terrorist attack. We need those departments to be fully funded too. Those are part of what public safety looks like and means. And even more broadly, we need to look at public safety holistically. To me, this includes implementing proven strategies and infrastructure to keep pedestrians safe and make sure our streets are well lit, safe pathways to school. And as your council member, I'm going to prioritize community and public safety with a bunch of different proven strategies. And that's a good start.
Thanks. Christina.
Well, as I mentioned, from my discretionary funds as city council member, I will fully fund programs that focus on addressing and resolving blight, illegal trash dumping, graffiti, and such. I'm going to invite community members to speak at town hall events, which have been neglected and the longest needed media attention. So as proven to be effective in other council districts, I will provide the funds to enable the LAPD to assign a dedicated unit to respond to calls for assistance for businesses in the local communities and residents who are being harassed or threatened by these criminals or by the mentally ill. They will not respond to any other calls other than that. Their sole responsibility will be to address the challenges facing the business owner or the resident in need. No more unwanted or unanswered 911 or 311 calls for help. That will not be coming due to a department priority list and not enough resources. I will allocate more funding for the police. We need to support our men and women in uniform. They put their lives in danger every single time they go out. They don't know what kind of call they're going out on. So this is very important. I'll be working together with not only the LAPD, but with the sheriff as well to address the needs of the community. Thank you.
Thanks, wonderful. Scott.
Thank you for the question. So I believe it's really important that we take a comprehensive approach to public safety. When I think about public safety, I think about three main components. One is culture, one is enforcement, and one is infrastructure. So when we talk about culture, we're talking about relationships, we're talking about community building, public engagement. This is the work that Melrose Action does in partnership with many other organizations like Mid-City West, like the wonderful Melrose walks that are happening on a regular basis. It's really important that we build community and have conversations. We can only solve these crimes if we're talking to each other and to our peace officers. So that's one piece. The second piece is enforcement. And as other candidates have said, we need a leaner, more effective policing than we currently have. Police should be focused on police work, not on criminalizing homelessness, not on armed response to traffic infractions, which is a huge waste of money and also has some very scary detrimental effects. So we need to be thinking, about community policing. What if we had a Koban, a small little police hut on Melrose in areas that really need some more presence, foot patrols. But we need to think about how we do it smartly because, there's only so much overtime pay that we can afford. So we need to think about restructuring. And the third piece is infrastructure. And we need to think about that broadly. We need to think about lighting. We need to think about cameras. We need to think about traffic calming, more space for pedestrians. I believe that road redesign on Melrose could make it a lot harder for the bad guys to get away fast. And also would, bring a lot more eyes to the street, which is vitally important in terms of public safety. So that's kind of my comprehensive vision. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Jimmy.
First, I'd work to develop a civilian office of neighborhood safety that works parallel to and in partnership with the police. We know that the police force increasingly has dealt with so many issues: mental illness, homelessness, domestic disputes, crowd control, that are not what police are trained to do. And when you have a parallel office, you both increase perceptions of public safety, but also reduce the very real risks that increased police presence pose to communities of color and queer people, undeniable risks that are long documented in the realities of policing. Richmond, California, long had the highest murder rate in California. In 2007, they adopted a civilian office of neighborhood safety that worked in coalition with community groups and with credible messengers who worked on violence prevention. And they saw in 10 years an 80% decline in the homicide rate, with no increase in police forces, but with much more targeted, structural, and preventative measures that were far more effective than increased policing. In addition to that, we've known for many years, and research has shown time and time again, that nothing makes people feel safer than eyes on the street. Having more people walking around, having that conviviality of people walking and being about in community together creates a feeling of public safety, which perpetuates real public safety. Streets like Melrose, 3rd, Beverly would be so much safer and would feel so much safer if people weren't already battling cars for dominance on the street. So by investing in mixed-use commercial residential housing along commercial corridors, you create the conditions that promote more eyes on the street and that allow more people to be comfortably out and about. And the combination of those two things would really get at the core of what's causing increased crime along Melrose and other streets in the neighborhood. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Molly.
Yeah, so I'm a big believer in unity, bringing people together, bringing the community together, neighbor to neighbor, having community watch come back, block captains, having those meetings. So in the residential areas. I also like the idea of a Los Angeles Police Department mobile station that they had a couple years ago that goes into various neighborhoods, also up on Melrose, where people can actually come up. The police officers are in this mobile station, and it gives also a sense of community and showing that there is a police presence. And having town halls with police officers, with our communities, and talking about the issues. Also, as a council member, I would go personally out and talk to business, the people who have been harmed by crimes. You know, I always question, like, where are our leaders during the riots when there was such havoc and civil unrest? I mean, people want to hear and see their leaders come out and be a part of the community and let them know that the leaders are with them because the people want to be listened to. So I would be always out there talking to small businesses, walking the streets, making sure there is also, I do not want to defund. I want to reform the police. I think they should have the funding they need. But also have social services. So rather than if there is a homeless person just creating havoc, that a social worker would go out and de-escalate the problem. So our police aren't being, run around going to different places, but they would stay with the high crime. And, the cameras, yes, for the license plate, and educating people what they can do so they feel safe in their homes, in their businesses. But it would happen in town halls, in Pan Pacific Park, in Westwood Veteran Park, all of the beautiful green spaces we have, Holmby Park, to gather people. And that's what Melrose Action is all about, community coming together for the greater good of all. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks for those really thoughtful answers. I was going to ask about police funding, but I feel like you've pretty much all talked about it. Does anybody want to defund the police? All right. It just didn't sound like that. I didn't know if that was going to be something you guys were advocating for, some of you. I want to ask about vending. By far, the most questions that I got from people for tonight was about the no-go zone and the vending on Melrose. Katie, I'd love to start with you and have you lay out the problem also and tell us what your solution is.
Yeah, so street vendors are a part of our local economy, and they're a very important part of our local economy, and they provide income to huge portions of all of our communities, and at the same time they can at times create challenges in public health concerns and access concerns. And so I think what we need to do with all things is find a balance and come up with a set of rules and regulations that will be easy to understand, easy to follow, easy to enforce, that will allow people who are doing their best to make a living in this city that is increasingly difficult to make a living to do so. And they are small businesses too. And I think we have an opportunity to create alliances and partnerships from more established small businesses that have storefronts and these street vendors and create real community and do it in a way where people where there's vibrancy. I mean, there are street vendors at the Grove, right? They're regulated in a different way, but there are street vendors at the 3rd Street Promenade, and so we need to find ways to allow them to continue, and at the same time to make sure that traffic can flow and people can get in and out of driveways and in and out of storefronts. And so the simpler the solution, the way we enforce it, the better. So that's sort of broadly speaking how I think about street vending.
Great, thanks. Christina.
Can you repeat the question? I didn't hear a question there. I'm sorry.
Sure. It's something we've all been discussing in the neighborhood a lot recently, and that is street vendors who are coming down onto Melrose and setting up in front of storefronts and selling T-shirts or whatever. And the neighborhood's very divided. Some people, want that to continue, and others feel it's, potentially not fair to the stores, the businesses, the restaurants that, people are blocking the way.
Right.
What are your
Right. Okay, well, yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I can definitely see how people are divided. In my opinion, as long as they're there legally and have permits and everything is in place as a small business should have, I personally don't see the problem. However, I would rather, and like I said, my whole thing is about transparency and having the community get together in a town hall meeting or having my door always open. I want to hear from small businesses. What do you guys want? That's what I'm going to try to provide as your next city councilwoman, because in my opinion, I think that's okay. Like I said, granted, they have their permits in place, everything's legal, and they're doing things. If you're selling food, I want to know that, you've been regulated and everything's clean and so forth. However, I can see the problem on the flip side. If you are blocking the business, or if you're selling T-shirts and the business behind you that you're blocking an entrance to is selling T-shirts, we're going to have a problem. So again, that's a community involvement issue. There is no, one-stop solution. I want to hear, because I want to be fair to both. I do admire and I appreciate small businesses, whether it's a storefront brick and mortar or the vendors, but it's a community issue and we're going to have to resolve that together moving forward.
Great, Scott.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I mean, so this is sort of an issue where the city council, frankly, has failed. The city council took. Let me start by saying I believe street vendors are an important part of our economy. I support vending, but the city council has dragged its feet in terms of completing the ordinance and now implementing it. Right. So there's been actually conversation about this in city council today, and only 165 permits out of like 10,000 vendors citywide. And so the city council has not been able to implement in a reasonable amount of time a fair, accessible policy that allows us to have vibrant street vending and also make sure it is licensed and able to be enforced if necessary. And we are feeling the consequences of that inaction in places like Melrose, where we have some wonderful street vendors, and we also have some folks doing things that are not so great, like blocking the public right of way. Like in some cases, it seems that some operators are shells for criminal action, like 3-Card Monte and things like that. And so we really need to get our act together as a city and build a comprehensive implemented policy so that we can really, have a vibrant economy on the street that works for everybody.
Thanks, Jimmy.
I see this as a real opportunity for a win-win and not an issue where we need to pit street vendors against brick and mortar businesses along major commercial corridors. If that's our starting point of competition, we're already framing this issue absolutely wrong. Street vendors are part of our urban fabric. One of the reasons it becomes so difficult to navigate this tension between street vendors and brick and mortar businesses is because it is so prohibitively onerous to start a business here. I don't know if anyone read the article in the San Francisco Chronicle about how difficult it was for a small immigrant family to start a ramen shop. It's even more difficult in LA, and it's even more difficult for street vendors. So we always have to remember that street vendors are making these decisions in a business regulatory context that is extremely difficult for them as small, largely immigrant entrepreneurs to navigate. Street vendors add vibrancy to our city, and as importantly, there are important international models. New York, Paris of places where street vendors aren't considered a nuisance, but are considered an add value. And that's what LA should strive for. And it's what I think LA already is in many ways, despite some of these challenges. If sidewalks were bigger, this would not be as much of an issue. Katie mentioned the 3rd Street Promenade. Part of why street vending works so effectively on the promenade is because it's entirely pedestrianized. So you don't have the same competition for sidewalk space. Again, it's wrong-headed to pit these two communities together. We've seen on the promenade how much they can add value together, and it becomes this lively commercial district. Street vending, though, should importantly not be a decision made out of economic desperation or deprivation, as it so often is. People are forced into street vending because additional options are largely unavailable. So part of a healthy street vending climate requires that we tackle the poverty that is driving many people to street vending. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yes, I support street vending, but strategically smart street vending, right? So like everybody is saying, so it's not blocking a driveway, it's not blocking pedestrians, it's not blocking a business. And I think that, yes, it can be worked out with the business and the street vendor. I think once again, it's about community talking things out, getting to know each other. That's what the wonderful thing is about living in a community, living in a city is. And then if we are advocating that, we have leaders who are advocating that, then it will actually come to play out. And yeah, what Scott had mentioned about the 165 who actually have permits, and Nithya Raman is trying to, she wrote pass a resolution to make it easier for vendors to get permits because supposedly it is such a difficult process. But, and yes, I think they should be helped to be able to create, the economy, add to the economy for themselves and for the city. But once again, strategically planned, strategically placed, so that once again, it's not harmful or creating havoc for other businesses, and that we work together. It's, once again, it's all about working together, not division, unity. Unity is power, division is weakness. Thank you.
Sam?
Yeah. So I support legal, regulated street vending and food trucks. It's an important way for many folks to support their families, and they add vibrancy to certain neighborhoods. But our city passed certain rules and regulations, and it's imperative for the city to actually enforce them. Permits have to be required and issued, taxes collected, ADA accessibility rules followed and honored. And these reasonable time, place, and manner regulations also protect our small brick and mortar businesses, right, that are on the brink. Street vendors can't unfairly compete with those businesses. That's just not fair. On Saturday, my kids and I walked down Melrose and Small Business Saturday to show our support despite the uptick in crime. And I said hello to a lot of the small business owners that I'm friends with that are supporting me. And I was struck by two things. One is that a lot of our favorite stores and shops had private security that were armed out front, which broke my heart. I understand it, why it's there, but it's a massive failure by our leaders. And secondly, these tables and these vendors, they block the right of way. We had to walk into the sidewalk at times to pass, and they were directly competing with some of the stores, shirts and other items, shoes with the store that's next door, and that's just not fair. Our city's failure to enforce its rules is a pattern throughout the city on every issue, and I think it's one of the fundamental reasons why our city is on the brink of a massive demise and decline. Oil and gas wells under our homes and schools are not being inspected, despite all the environmental folks that are allegedly in charge. Airbnb rules are being flouted and not enforced. House parties are proliferating. Affordable units that are getting built in these massive projects that are not getting in the hands of low-income tenants. Mega homes are getting built without permits, and neighbors have to get lawyers to fight them. There's a level of lawlessness that's taken over Los Angeles on every issue, in every corner, in every department, and it has to end if Los Angeles will be a safe, livable place. And we need to hold those career politicians accountable before it's too late.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Those are really thoughtful, terrific answers. I want to ask about the homeless. This is the homeless question. homeless encampments. It's really tough. We all know there's no easy answers here. And so in a really narrow question, a constituent calls you and says, there is a homeless encampment in front of my house. There's drug use, there's crime, there's health hazards. What do you do? How do you solve that? I want to start with Christina.
Oh, thank you for that. So each month I plan to hold a public safety roundtable with members of the community, as I mentioned, community groups, senior lead officers of the council district. High crime areas will be identified. They'll be pointed out and resources will be allocated towards them. There's a certain amount of crime as a result of the action of, as you said, the mentally ill, the homeless. More than 70% of the homeless, unfortunately, are mentally ill, and we have to acknowledge that. And it's not just a housing issue, it's actually a public safety issue. You know, there's a pilot program bill which was passed in California Senate. This bill, which was passed, gives us the ability to remove someone from any kind of condition, whether they are harming themselves or posing harm unto others. And, you know, this individual, this individual requires 8 responses. So 8 calls in from either the fire department, the LAPD, or a social worker in order to go ahead and, instead of holding them for 72 hours, to actually put them in a secure environment, so to speak, for a year. And, you know, in my opinion, this is something that needs to be done. They have to be documented. They're given, you know, whether it's rehab, they're given medicine for their ailment. So calls for assistance to such individuals, they have to be tracked. And it's the mental health professionals whose job it is to enter into the pilot program. So this is one way. I know it's temporary, but in the long term, this is how we will help people. Because imagine if you call them and, you know, it's the first time, second time, and this was, correct me if I'm wrong, passed by the Democrat Scott Wiener. I don't know why the magic number 8, maybe it should be 2, 3 calls, but, you know, they need to have a community outreach involvement program as well to help them.
Scott?
Thank you for the question. I first want to say that, you know, every encampment is different, but I support a framework for addressing our unhoused neighbors that takes into account both the risk that they are experiencing on the street and the place-based challenges of encampments. We do know that some encampments are issues in terms of both public safety and public health for housed and unhoused folks alike. So what do? We need to drive resources to those places. And we're seeing programs in some council districts like CD11 and CD4 that are specifically targeting encampments that are of great concern to communities, and sending outreach workers to make sure that our unhoused neighbors are connected with services and housing. I will say that the only way that this is going to work, and the only way that we are going to solve homelessness, is if we have a range of temporary solutions to send folks to that allows them to keep their dignity, and that meets individual people's needs, right? So we're talking about safe camping, we're talking about safe parking, we're talking about tiny home villages. We're not so much talking about congregate shelter, which is not a good solution for most people. So I will apply the muscular leadership on the ground to make sure we get those temporary solutions implemented very, very fast, because we all know that the permanent supportive housing, although important, is not being built fast enough. And then, of course, we also need comprehensive housing reform, because we need a lot more housing a lot faster and a lot cheaper, both to stem the tide of new unhoused folks and to house people very quickly.
Great, Jimmy.
So to answer the specific question, I would hire trained social workers with experience navigating homelessness issues onto my personal council staff. And these outreach workers would be well paid and well supported. So often the street outreach teams, which are quite limited at present through LAHSA, are not only limited in number, but they're extraordinarily lowly paid. So you have this incredible churn where the individual relationships that social workers are supposed to be forming with unhoused residents become a one-off quick interview that don't actually lead to a long-term relationship that can build the trust that gets someone into housing. So that's baseline. We develop an individualized plan to get that person into a housing situation that works for them. The easiest answer to this question is to say, you'd call my council office, you'd have somebody there in an hour to sweep them away from the end of the block. That answer is woefully insufficient. If that is the answer, that person will be back out on the street, maybe not on your corner, but certainly on one of your neighbor's corners within 72 hours. So it is a woefully insufficient answer. The only approach that we've seen actually work for street encampments is individualized, sustained outreach that develops housing plans that actually work for people. The Berendo Street encampment, some of the communities on the beaches where we've made real inroads on this very, very pernicious issue have used this approach. And that's where our North Star has to be, the only thing that has actually worked. That said, I take slight issue with the question and its short-term focus, only because I feel that it at times misses the forest for the trees. You can't talk about street encampments without talking about the larger housing ecosystem within Los Angeles. Street encampments are the very tiny tip of the housing iceberg. Underneath the surface are millions of Angelenos on the brink of eviction, suffering from serious housing precarity, thousands of whom are on the brink of being pushed into homelessness. And if we aren't talking about what's beneath the iceberg, we'll never sufficiently deal with what's above it. Thank you very much.
Molly?
Yes, the homelessness, right? I mean, it's going on. It's just getting worse and worse. You have to look at that too. Why has it gotten worse and worse and not better? Somewhere there is great gridlock. It also has to do with a lot of corruption. And, why don't we have enough affordable housing? I mean, that's the key. We have to build more affordable housing. We have to repurpose buildings and get these people off the street. We also, it depends on if someone calls and who is living in the homeless encampment. Is it someone mentally ill? Is it someone drug addicted? Is it someone alcohol? I mean, there are so many variables. So each one would have to be a specific situation. But also it all comes down to cleaning up the encampment, but having then these people or person somewhere to go. So I would like to take homeless people, people who are able to, and train them to be homeless advocates. So they become part of the repair and the remedy, the recovery of the whole system. And since they were homeless, they would be able to relate to the people that are homeless. And those would be the people who would work with social services to go out there. LAHSA would go out, make sure they would have somewhere to go. But we need the affordable housing and the place to place these people. Because I just think, we put them in these shelters, but then they're out on the streets again. So or get more little houses, homes up and running, and for that to be a temporary, but we need to build, always I say, affordable housing, repurpose these buildings, these empty buildings we have all over LA, which is also more sustainable, and create homeless housing. But also we need to differentiate the mentally ill, the addicted, and then the ones who are families living in cars and so forth. So each one has to be taken care of, but they all need houses. Thank you.
Sam?
So this massive humanitarian crisis of homelessness is a direct result of a lack of urgency and leadership by our city and county leaders. So let's discuss what they're doing with all of our money. So it's not an issue of resources. The city and the county spend $2 billion of our tax dollars every single year They're spending it on building very expensive housing ground up, doing it very slowly, taking 6 years to build each project, and it's upwards of $500,000, $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 per unit to build. Meanwhile, the problem on the streets has gone 80% worse in the last 6 years, and every day 5 of our neighbors on the streets are dying from overdose, from violence, from exposure. The county and the city are failing us, and they're refusing to admit their approaches aren't working. Look, it took the murder of 2 veterans right before Veterans Day this year on San Vicente outside the VA, not too far from CD5, for the federal government to come in and say, city and county, you have abdicated responsibility, you are a failure, we're gonna act and move 100 veterans indoors. So my guiding principle is that every night an Angelino sleeps on the street or in a park or on a bench is a preventable calamity. Every time someone who's unhoused dies on the streets, that's a stain on us. And we can't allow the perfect solution, which is a brand new permanent supportive housing project, to be the enemy of the good. What we need to do is, yes, build more affordable workforce, permanent supportive housing, and we got to do it faster, cheaper, more innovatively. But at the same time, we have to get folks indoors immediately. So I've been going to shelters throughout the district, and what I've been hearing is it's like trying to treat hypothermia by allowing someone to freeze to death in the cold while you build a brand new hospital. That's insanity. We bring them indoors, you wrap them in blankets, you get them something hot to drink, and you save their life. And that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna build more shelters, more tiny homes, hotel and motels, whatever we can do to get people in a roof as soon as possible. Every single night, 1,000 shelter beds in the city of Los Angeles are empty. That's criminal. And secondly, the mental health aspects. We have to be serious that mental health and addiction is a big problem here. We got to change our mental health laws to save people before they die. We have to force the county to do more to house folks who have mentally and have addiction issues. And then we got to get police out of this work. And then we got to keep our neighborhoods and streets safe as well as part of this process.
Katie?
Thank you. So we cannot continue to allow people to live and die on our streets. We need immediate, effective, and compassionate solutions to get people off the streets and into housing and connected to services. We cannot begin to stabilize people and begin to address their unique needs until they have a roof over their heads. So we need to act with urgency and purpose and leadership to create flexible, cost-effective interim housing solutions. There's a lot of money that we just got from the state and federal government. We should be using it right now to buy motels and hotels and commercial buildings and converting them for housing. It's a lot less expensive to convert existing buildings than to build ground up construction. We learned that from HHH. Tiny home villages, safe parking, safe camping, these are all part of interim solutions while we continue to build supportive housing. It's not rocket science. This is not rocket science. We're just lacking the will and sense of urgency. Other cities have done this. We do not have to reinvent the wheel. We already know what we need to be doing. We just don't have the fire lit under us. Having been at the county, I know that all of the services, mental health services, addiction services, physical health services, they're all provided by the county. The city does the housing, the county provides the services. We need to be working hand in glove between the county and the city on provision of services and care. We are not doing that right now. It is at best ad hoc. And that is purely a leadership void and vacuum. The first day in office, I will call both supervisors whose districts overlap with CD5 and set up regular standing weekly calls twice a week if we need it to start working on each and every encampment, each and every tent to get people off the streets as quickly as possible. There are some people who are not going to willingly get the help they need because of addiction or mental health. We need to work with the state to create safe places for them to go to get the help they need. We used to send all those people to jail or to mental health hospitals. We don't do that anymore. That's good we don't do it anymore, but we don't have anywhere else for them to go. We do not have enough mental health beds, and we need to start building them, and we need to be in partnership with the state to make sure that happens. Thank you.
Great, thanks. That was really illuminating. We have so many great questions that are being asked by the audience, and I was emailed so many questions literally while this is happening. Let's do that. We can start with you, Scott. Let's talk about Prop 47 from 2014. So many people are emailing me right now and asking, and I see some questions up here. Can you walk us through Prop 47 and your thoughts on it?
Prop 47. So the focus of Prop 47 was, making sure that people can be reassimilated into constructive lives. And I think that's a good thing. I don't think that Prop 47 is the source of our public safety problems at all. I just don't. Katie talked about, we're seeing national trends around public safety. We had a pandemic that is to a large extent driving some of this crime. We have policy failures at the local level. I don't think this is, and we have issues of inequality and poverty, and policing that is out of date and ineffective, and continuing to do damage to the lives of our Black and brown neighbors. And so I don't think that this is the source of our problems. I understand people's concerns, but I think we need to reimagine public safety. I think, you asked whether we should be defunding the police. That's not language I use, but I do think we should be reallocating funds to the core solutions. We know that criminalization of homelessness has been a policy failure for decades. And yet this city council is double downing on it with 4118. Paul Koretz wasn't long ago, year and a half ago, 2 years ago, he came to Mid-City West and said, homelessness is not really an issue in my community. So we've had council members and the city asleep at the wheel, and we need to deal with these issues locally. I don't think it's a matter of that state ballot measurement that's causing us public safety problems.
Jimmy?
So Proposition 47 did three things. First, it allowed certain felonies classified by the state to be reclassified as misdemeanors. So it decreased the ante on the incarceration threat of certain criminal charges. Second, for those same misdemeanors, it allowed those charged with felonies in the past to petition for resentencing under the new reduced standards of sentencing of Prop 47. And third, it allowed those who have been released on felonies that have since been reclassified as misdemeanors under Prop 47 to petition to have their criminal record changed from a felony to a misdemeanor. So that's sort of the lay of the land of what Proposition 47 did. And the offenses tended to gravitate around theft, shoplifting, drug use, and whatnot. So I absolutely think that Proposition 47 and an approach to our social problems that isn't rooted in incarceration is where we need to be dedicating our time and energy. The drug offenses that were reclassified as misdemeanors, both of my parents struggled very, very seriously with substance use throughout my life, as did my sister. And I think about the long, long and hard journeys to sobriety that all of them went through that took multiple years and hundreds of hours of Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. And the idea that incarceration would have been a productive tool for helping them get to the lives that they have now is anathema to everything. And it's downright scary when I think about my own life in that context. So when I think about something like Prop 47 and the idea that it takes the focus away from the carceral system, I think that's something we need to be applauding and not something that we need to be scapegoating. Similarly, the idea that people could get their records expunged or changed is something that we really need to be focused on. The mark of a criminal record is so severe for limiting people's housing, educational, occupational opportunities that the idea that somebody should be hindered from that because of the mistake that they've since been released for is not the kind of city or state that I want to live in.
Molly.
Okay, thank you. I was just thinking about Prop 47 and what Jimmy was talking about. And I mean, I don't know about if they, if it has created more crime, or if it has been, because of the lesser, these are, they're no longer felonies and people can shoplift and don't get prosecuted because it's only $950. And I would have to say, I think it might be good to revise it. But yeah, I don't think, once again, I think we have to look at the systemic issue of crime in our country, in our city, and our educational system. I think we have to go at the root of these issues, because, we do the surface, we put a Band-Aid over the jugular and it's not working, obviously. We do the Prop 47, we do this, we do that. And I think we need our education system to be better. LA Unified Schools need to be better. I don't know why they aren't. And that we now, people have started charter schools and send their children to private schools because the public system is not good. And one of the wealthiest cities in the world. Why do we have one of the worst educational systems, which creates then uneducated people who go out and commit crimes? So I am all for fixing the root of the problem. And yes, not making, what's it called? Career criminals, if they've, done these specific crimes in Prop 47. But I think after a while, we have to look at, once again, fixing the system itself so we don't create criminals and that they then they become part of the system. We've got to protect people and help them.
Yeah.
Sure. So in 2014, 60% of the voters voted to approve Prop 47, the Safe Neighborhoods and Schools Act, right? And we were promised that the savings from reduced incarceration costs would be invested in drug and mental health in schools and programs for at-risk youth and victim services, and that we would create a system of alternatives to incarceration. These are laudable objectives that I wholeheartedly support. But let's be honest, and that's a test of mature leadership. There have been substantial unintended real-world consequences from Prop 47. Criminals have adapted, gangs have been emboldened, and that's what I'm hearing from public defenders, district attorneys, judges, police officers, but more importantly, the residents and the business owners in CD5. To those who think that Prop 47 has had no role, what do we do as a society if someone walks into a Walgreens or Starbucks or a Best Buy, fills their backpack with anything they see and walks out? Right now, it's a ticket at best, right? Crimes are not even being reported by many of us because we've just lost faith that the police will pursue the criminals or the prosecutors will go prosecute them. And again, the test of mature leadership, and I challenge everyone here, is to admit that some mistakes happen in terms of policy. These are really complicated, hard issues, and we've got to fix them. And that's not what career politicians at the city and the county are willing to do now. They haven't shown leadership to do it. And frankly, I don't think they'll ever do it because they were behind this. So we have, and I supported Prop 47, I voted for it, but it's time to revisit ways to improve it.
Katie?
Thank you. So Prop 47 was passed against a background, the staggering fact that California has an incarceration rate of 549 people per 100,000 people, which includes prisons, jails, immigration detention, and juvenile justice facilities, meaning that we lock up a higher percentage of our people than almost any other democracy on our planet. And we wanted to do something about that, right? So Prop 47 redirected the savings that we achieved from reduced incarceration to treatment interventions with the goal of reducing recidivism. And I think one of the unintended consequences of Prop 47 that we're seeing playing out on our streets right now is that drug use isn't being charged at all because officers aren't bothering with misdemeanors. It's right to not criminalize personal drug use, but like I said earlier, we don't have anywhere for people who are addicted to drugs to go to get clean. We used to send them to jail. That wasn't the right approach. But now we need drug rehab facilities and job opportunities on the back end to address this, right? And having spent 6 years as a senior policy advisor at the County Board of Supervisors, I know how badly we need criminal justice reform. And we've been doing that work, making our carceral system about rehabilitation and opportunity, and trying to provide opportunities and pathways out of poverty. That's why we worked hard to make the Office of Diversion and Reentry successful. This is a county department that was created recently in the last few years. We overhauled the juvenile justice system, eliminated punitive carceral strategies like solitary confinement for kids. We literally used to put 13-year-olds in solitary confinement for days and days at a time. We don't do that anymore. We need to continue to create pipelines into good paying jobs for targeted populations. And that includes people who have interacted with the criminal justice system. We also took the lead on Measure J, because investing in our communities is how we make the systemic change that results in safer communities for all of us in the long term. Public safety is a regional challenge, and we're not going to just solve it in CD5. We have to solve it regionally, and we have to do it in a systemic, long-term strategic way while also solving for the short-term realities of an increase in crime. Thank you.
Christina?
Well, I will acknowledge there is a systemic flaw in the justice system. But when we have a district attorney and a governor that minimize these crimes to $950 or less, and they're booked, they go to jail, and that's it, they're released. What do we expect? There's no deterrent, there's no punishment for these people. They come back, they do it again. They come back, they do it again. We need to fix the situation. At the local level, we have to work with the communities. We have to work with the state. We have to work with our supervisors and with the other districts as well. We have to seek remedy to a situation which favors the criminal and not the victim. I'm going to be working with local chambers of commerce and other business organizations. And of course, like I mentioned before, big fan of the LAPD and the Sheriff's Office. And I plan to dedicate resources to the areas which have been hit the worst with the arson, the violence, the looting. I mean, the literally picking up a gun in broad daylight. I mean, just the other day, we had two criminals following a woman into her home with a baby stroller, and they robbed her in daylight. This is unacceptable. And again, what's the point of having, extra streetlights come on? What's the point of having more cameras if it's not going to start with the district attorney who's going to prosecute these criminals? And let's call them what they are, criminals. And, unfortunately, recalling Gavin Newsom didn't happen, so we're stuck with him. But let's think about the bigger picture. What are we going to do as city council members? We have to use our discretionary funds. We have to put a stop to this. We need to punish the criminals. We need to deter them. It's not just, oh, I'm sorry, you took a little bit of, whatever XYZ from Walgreens. Let's release you out on the street. And then what do you think is going to happen again? It's going to happen again and again and again. And like I said, there's a systemic flaw in our justice system, and that needs to be given a hard look at, and we need to fix it from the inside out, working with our communities, with our LAPD, and with the Sheriff's Department. Absolutely.
Next, it's a very quick question. It's a one-word answer. If you could not vote for yourself on pain of torture, which one of the candidates here tonight would you vote for? Jimmy.
Wasn't expecting that one. I would vote for Scott.
Molly?
This is like putting us on the spot.
Oh yeah, no, it's a rough question. No doubt.
I would say Sam.
Sam?
I think because public safety is so important to me, I would say Molly as well.
Katie?
I would say Jimmy.
Christina?
Well, since nobody voted for me, I'd have to vote for myself or a clone of myself.
Oh, well, thank you guys. I know that was a rough question. Oh, Scott, sorry.
I have respect for my fellow candidates. It's a tough question. I would have to go with Jimmy Biblars.
Thanks. Yeah, that was a tough one. The next question does not need a 2-minute answer. It's really just vaccine mandate. Who is for a vaccine mandate? We can just.
Can you be more specific
Oh,
in
sorry,
terms of what form of
that,
vaccine mandate specifics, please?
Sure, vaccines are available to everybody, that moving forward, in order to go to certain places, work at certain companies, you'll have to get a vaccine. That vaccines become a part of our everyday life. Christina,
Yes, what's the question?
what are your thoughts on vaccines?
Oh, vaccines are great. I don't think they should be mandated. Absolutely not. It's a personal choice. Where there is risk versus benefits, people have to do their own diligent research. They have to dig deep onto both sides of the spectrum, and they need to decide between themselves and their physician what is best for them, whether they have, underlying conditions, if they're over a certain age group. It absolutely, in my opinion, should not be mandated, but it is a personal choice. Yes.
Sam, what's your thought?
Yeah, the data is clear. The vaccines are safe and effective. I strongly support vaccines. I believe we have to do everything we can to expand and incentivize vaccines. And within, we follow the science, and within legal boundaries and with reasonable exemptions, I would support mandates in the specific contexts that you've outlined.
Anybody else want to weigh in on this one? Jimmy?
Yeah, I think we've seen how effective vaccine mandates are across the globe, but I think there's a bit of a local case study between the LAPD's approach versus the sheriff's department's approach, where the chief of police of the LAPD was very forceful, and very quickly, almost 100% of LAPD has been successfully vaccinated and hasn't been a major issue, whereas the sheriff's office has continually dragged its feet, and we're seeing incredible vaccine resistance, and that puts all of us in harm's way by being surrounded by people, especially with the new Omicron variant that is spreading. We just saw a case in San Francisco. That I think that's a real important distinction there.
Molly, I know you wanted to weigh in.
Oh, yeah. I believe in a mandate. But once again, if someone has obviously health issues, like I have a friend who has Graves' disease who, is terrified to do it. I mean, if someone has an underlying condition and can't do it, obviously they can't. But yes, I think it is for the greater good of all, which I always believe in, that we help each other. And, if my neighbor is safer because I get vaccinated, and and down the line. So yes, and to have our cards, and because we have to get this under control so then we can all be free once again and help each other.
Scott?
So I have a lot of personal experience with this because I'm a case investigator and contact tracer at UCLA. We do have a vaccine mandate for students at UCLA and for staff as well. And we have a 99% vaccination rate among students at UCLA. It's a huge success story. And the campus is much safer as a result. So I strongly support vaccine mandates to be in spaces when you're with other people. I mean, if you want to stay at home and not see anybody, okay, but we have to recognize this is a matter of public health. This is a matter of we are a human collective, and your individual decision impacts other human beings. So yes, it's appropriate. It's a matter of public health.
Katie?
I don't need to flog a dead horse here. I think vaccine mandates are really important. This is a forum on public safety. And if you want to talk about the biggest challenge we have right now to our own public safety, it's COVID. And we are not going to be safe as a city, a country, a planet until everyone who can get vaccinated does that. And there are very few exceptions that I'm willing to tolerate right now. I have 2 young kids who are not eligible for the vaccine, and every single day I worry about their health and whether or not they're going to come home with COVID. So.
Well, thanks everybody for that. Sorry, I was confused. A confusing way to phrase it, but interesting answers. We have a couple of questions that have come in for individual people. Scott, what has Mid-City West done while you were chair to help public safety in this area?
Many things. So we've co-hosted a lot of different forums around public safety. Had a lot of public engagement through walks, through town hall forums, by co-sponsoring National Night Out. So all kinds of public engagement around public safety that has been place-based. Mid-City West also championed public realm improvements, which I think would have a dramatic improvement, make a dramatic improvement on safety in Melrose and other corridors. Let's talk about Uplift Melrose, which I was a champion of. And I'm very excited that many of my other fellow candidates have come around to supporting this idea as well. You know, Melrose, like I said, we need to talk about safety comprehensively. The #1 way that children die in this city is by being hit by cars. I have a 4-year-old daughter, and so this concerns me very deeply. And we have had 3 deaths along Melrose in the last few years. Including a young musician who was wiped away just walking on the sidewalk. The truth of the matter is that the permissive road design on Melrose allows people to drive very, very fast, particularly at night when it empties out. And young men on testosterone and sometimes alcohol have something to prove. And we have seen the consequences. A road redesign that reprioritizes Melrose for people that are walking and biking and still allows cars, of course, could make a dramatic improvement on our public safety. And I'm proud to have supported that.
Perfect. And Katie, there's a question up there for you. Can you name the policies that have made a difference from Sheila's office?
In what sense?
In public safety.
Yeah, so I think there's been a huge shift over the last 6 years since new supervisors came in towards rehabilitation and creating opportunities for communities that traditionally haven't had a lot of opportunity. And when people are given the choice between a life of lawlessness and a path to a good paying, stable life, overwhelmingly, they choose the latter. And so that's what we've been focused on. My work has mostly been in the environmental space, the sustainability space, the creative economy space, creating jobs, working with our populations that we touch, because so many different populations come through the county, you know, the foster care system, people coming through the criminal justice system, all sorts of ways we touch people, people who are on food stamps. So we have a sense of who those people are, and we've used the power of government to connect those people to pipelines into good paying jobs. And so I think that that's about public safety too. Like, how do you give people other choices? And, you know, like I said at the beginning, there's been an increase in crime across the country. And anyone who tells you what the 1 or 2 reasons are for why that's happening are lying. It's complicated why crime is up. And I'm not going to speculate on why, but broadly speaking, when we give people opportunities to make better choices, they do that. And so I'm proud of the work that the Board of Supervisors has done on criminal justice reform, providing people opportunities to have other paths and trying to create rehabilitation for people.
Thanks. I wanted to ask about tools and techniques. What have you learned from other counties, other cities, other areas, other districts, and how they're doing, how they're solving the public safety issues? You know, whether it's new technologies and license plate readers, or what have you seen that's worked in other places that you would like to bring in here? And I'd like to start with Molly.
Well, this has to do with hate crimes, which is a public safety issue. So I was just reading about, they've implemented in Marin County in San Diego a hate crime hotline that goes directly to the DA's office, which I mean, people can leave message. It's in English, Spanish, Vietnamese, and Farsi. So people can call in and leave a helpline, what's going on with them if they've received a hate crime. And I just think that's a great way. And once again, it brings in where people can take an action immediately, and it goes directly to the DA. And so I think, I was thinking that would be a great thing to also implement here. But that is the one thing that some of other cities are doing differently. And mostly though, it's all the things that we've been talking about: license plate readers, more lighting, more visibility of police presence on the streets, and more community, and all those things we've been talking about.
Sam?
Yes, so I think the answer here is we don't have to go to other cities. We can just look at parts of Los Angeles where it's working. And the answer here is a really close partnership and relationship between communities and neighborhoods and businesses and law enforcement. And I have a long history of working with on this issue of public safety. These issues are not new to me. I was a city commissioner overseeing non-sworn LAPD recruiting, hiring, and discipline. I was on the city's gun violence prevention task force. I've been a leader on fighting anti-Semitism. There's a question about that in the chat as well on Pico and in La Brea area. Really been champion about how we can protect those neighborhoods more. And I've led public safety issues in our neighborhood association. And what's proven is a close relationship between the residents and your senior lead officer or your area captain. In West LA, it was Kids Captain Tom. Our senior lead was Chris Rigsdale. It's now James Allen. I know we have four police divisions: CD5, West LA, Wilshire, Hollywood, and West Valley. I know the structure. I'm going to hit the ground running. In the Melrose area, we had a great Commander Paulson, and now we have some great leadership as well. And Commanding Officer Monaco and Otero and Senior Lead Dantzler. It's critical to work with these people because they're well-intentioned. They want to help. And also, like Councilmember Koretz, I'm going to have a devoted member of my staff on public safety, similar to Greg Martayan, who will be the liaison, will be the advocate, because we can't do this alone. There's a role for law enforcement, there's a role for private sector and business, it's for community, faith, and all of us. But the fact right now, the city and the county are failing us because people are dying. The stats are startling. Why did we go from 1 murder in 2019 in the Wilshire Division, where Melrose is housed, to 13 in 2021? And there's a lot of factors to it, but we can't be okay with it. We have to get answers from our leadership, and we got to hold them accountable.
Katie?
Sure. So I'll go to an example of a program in Eugene, Oregon. It's called Cahoots, and it's a mobile crisis intervention program that's staffed by a clinic and its personnel in partnership with the police department. It's a relationship that's in a program that's been in place for nearly 30 years, and it's really well embedded in the community. And I think it provides a model for what a really good partnership between community-based health nonprofits and the police department could look like in a really organized, intentional, fully integrated way. Cahoots provides support for PD by taking on a lot of that social service type calls, including crisis counseling. And they often provide the initial support and transport for people who are either on drugs or mentally ill, and sort of get them the non-emergency care they need to free up emergency responders to respond to other calls. And so I think that it's a good model. I've had conversations with the fire department about their interest in figuring out if there's a different classification of fire department employee to help with taking some of the load off of them when they transport someone to the hospital. A firefighter has to wait, or a paramedic has to wait until that person is intaken at the hospital, and sometimes that takes hours. And so while they're sitting there waiting for the unhoused person to get help or to be sort of triaged and taken care of, that means that they're not freed up to go respond to other 911 emergency calls. And so the Cahoots program is kind of like that, and I'd like to see us figure out if we can tailor it to work in LA.
I want to get through this one round and then ask one more question. Christina, innovative ideas that work other places.
Sure. Well, our city council so far and our supervisors have failed us. And you could see the homelessness, the crime, it's on the rampant. It's horrible. We need to do something about it. And, broken window theory from New York is where city leaders adopted a policy addressing crime at the very basic level. If you allow a seemingly low-level criminal action to go unaddressed, the result is not only an escalation in crime, but an increase in the severity of the crime. And as proven to be effective in other city council districts, I will provide the funds to enable the LAPD to assign a dedicated unit to respond to calls and assistance from businesses, community leaders, churches, residences who are being harassed and threatened by individuals who are violent or mentally ill. They will not respond to any other calls other than the connected situation at hand. So that's what I plan to implement. Like I said, this is part of the community outreach program. This is our communities coming together with our law enforcement individuals and our police officers. It is assigning certain units, but it's also working together. So if you see something, say something kind of approach. So I want an open door policy. I want people to come in and tell me, hey, this is what's happening in my, neighborhood of this district. And I will be there right then at that situation, hearing you, listening to what you say. I'm all about transparency. You will not be ignored in my council.
Scott?
Thank you.
So, as we reimagine public safety, I think we should be looking not just to other cities in the US, but other countries who are doing a lot better job than us. So look at Japan. Again, Japan has a lot of these kobans, these very small police stations in around communities. They have a lot of unarmed foot patrol. We have a very different system of like our station is all the way down in Venice, very, very far away from Melrose, right? And then we have this kind of militarized operation of cars and heavily armed. It hasn't been working very well. I think we need something more on the ground, more connected to community in terms of our infrastructure. The other thing that I would say in terms of built environment is the most vibrant places around the world are the safest. Look at places like Paris and France. I mean, they have crime issues too, but they're a lot safer than Los Angeles. And so we ought to be thinking about built environment. Like we need more neighborhood serving businesses on Melrose, like a market, like a grocery that everybody would walk to, like housing, by the way, because housing on Melrose would create ownership of the street. We have one project that went in on the north side of Melrose, which I think is going to be great. We need more of that because that is eyes on the street, and folks that are going to have a real passion for making Melrose safe. So look to our peer cities that are really starting to build along commercial boulevards. We should be doing more of that here, including at Melrose.
Jimmy, I toss it to you.
Great, thanks. So I'll start with Boston and what's known as the Boston Miracle, the reality that crime in Boston was extremely serious through the early 90s, and through a combination rooted in nonprofit violence prevention, reduced its crime rate in a decade by 79%. And what happened in Boston was you saw community groups, particularly led by churches and synagogues, that were actively working with a small group of people that are responsible for the vast majority of crimes. And it was concerted, sustained work that was part police-led, but also involved cognitive behavioral therapy and job counseling and educational resources. And it was this fantastic and comprehensive program that totally changed the corner on Boston. The sociologist Pat Sharkey has studied it and showed the direct correlation between the incidence of nonprofits that are working in the criminal justice space and decreases in crime. We've seen some of that modeled with some of Homeboy Industries work here in LA that was directly modeled after the Boston Miracle, and we absolutely need to expand that. The second example I'll give is the Red Hook community courts in New York City. We often think that victims are a monolith and that they all want the same thing. Every victim of a crime wants someone incarcerated for as long as possible, and that's going to be what makes them feel maximally safe. And in survey after survey of people who've experienced crime, we know that that's just not true. We know that incarceration doesn't necessarily make victims feel safer in the long run, and it doesn't give them the sense of justice or closure that they're often seeking. So what the Red Hook community courts do is they empower victims and their families to be engaged in what kind of punishment the perpetrator receives. Sometimes it's an incarceration sentence, but they're involved in even decisions like how long that is, but often it's not that. It's designed between a judge and victims about what will actually make them feel better. Is it community service? Is it a restorative justice exercise? Is it communication? What is it that's actually going to make them feel whole and feel safe, which is what I think victim services should be rooted in. So I think those are two great examples. I also mentioned the Richmond example for the Office of Neighborhood Safety, but thank you.
Molly, do you want to weigh in quickly? I'd love to get to my last question.
I already answered.
Okay, it's been a long night.
Okay.
If you are elected as councilman of CD5, what would you do to build and maintain a relationship with the police department in your district? I think we're at Sam. And you don't need the full 2 minutes if you can say it faster.
Sure. I think, first of all, it's partnering with great organizations like Melrose Action. I think you've been really the tip of the spear representing the residents in the area, expressing concerns and getting the attention of the council office, working with law enforcement really closely, your senior lead, your area commander, the patrol commander. These are really important relationships that have to be fostered. There's some really good ideas that we talked about tonight: license plate readers, infrastructure, improving streets, and also bringing people to the table. I'll use Melrose Uplift as a case study. That could have been a really great win-win, right? There's some real concerns on the side of the opponents, and concerns on the side of the supporters about the status quo. And a job of a council member is not to kill a project because there's some concerns, and it's also not to approve something and ignore what residents are saying. We could have mitigated the issues of emergency services and traffic and found really a win-win. And I think that's what I'm going to do. That's my approach. That's what I've done for a living, both as a litigator and as a mediator. I will fight when I have to, but I also will bring people together in shared values. And there's nothing that's more important for city government than keeping people safe, right? And I also want to we talked about a lot of statistics. I think it doesn't feel right that we're talking about the number of people who've been murdered without putting some names and some stories to them. And these are people that we know who had dreams. I think as a father, I think of the father of Jaron Bradford, an aspiring 26-year-old musician who was murdered on Melrose because he tried to break up a fight outside of Shoe Palace. I think of Gabe Deny, a 31-year-old who was murdered in his backyard at 6th in Maryland by someone who was a transient who was armed. As council member, I will do everything in my power to prevent another murder, and I will get people in the room, whether it's law enforcement, business, the city, the county, the DA, to make sure another tragedy does not happen in our community.
Katie?
The question was about how I'll foster a relationship with law enforcement.
Yeah, building that relationship and nurturing.
Yeah, so it started long ago, and I think it's all about relationships. It's about building trust. It's about being transparent. It's about meeting people where they are. I think that my office will be a place where we talk openly about priorities. We collaborate across different sectors. Law enforcement needs to be at the table, community-based organizations, residents, businesses, housed, unhoused. We need to be bringing all sorts of people together to figure out how to problem solve in the most effective, efficient way. And law enforcement is a partner and has to be at the table. And I look forward to working closely with the senior lead officers who cover the 5th and also more broadly, the 5th Council District touches the city of Beverly Hills, the city of West Hollywood, the city of Oakland City. And crime doesn't start and stop at the 5th Council District. It bleeds over, and the issues we're talking about are regional issues. And so having those relationships across cities and making sure that our office can be a coordinator between, say, the Sheriff's Department, which services West Hollywood, and LAPD, which services our district, is really important. There needs to be sort of seamless integration and partnership across those boundaries to make sure that we're keeping everybody safe. So I would be that convener and connector.
Christina?
Sure. I would provide funds to enable the LAPD to assign a dedicated unit to respond to calls, again, like I mentioned, to help with businesses and residents. And if there's any issues with public safety, such as criminal activity going on, or the homeless, or whether they're lying in the street or somebody mentally ill yelling, I would definitely support our sheriff, which I do, and our LAPD. But how good is LAPD going to do when we have a district attorney who doesn't do his job and prosecute? So you have, on the one hand, apples and oranges. You have the police doing their job. You have community leaders doing their job. You have businesses, small businesses struggling. You have businesses paying for security, private security, because why? Because of Prop 47, because as soon as the criminals get caught, they get released out in the street again. So I will advocate for a very hardcore prosecutor that's going to deter the criminals. And I would definitely advocate for allocating more funds to the police department and working in conjunction with the sheriff's department, as I mentioned. Also, again, it comes down to the community. It comes down to neighborhood council groups, neighborhood watch, the community working with CD5 in the other districts, having open door policy, transparency, all that other stuff coming into play. It takes a whole village to run this. So yes, it's about helping one another and supporting our police. Absolutely.
Jimmy, build and maintain a good relationship with the police. How do you do it?
So to start, I would talk, listen, and learn. And in conversations that I've had with police officers throughout LA, I keep hearing the same things repeated over and over again, that there's whole areas of the police portfolio, traffic, mental health, homeless intervention, that officers feel deeply undertrained for, ill-equipped to handle some of the very difficult situations that they are put in those arenas, and frankly, often quite uninterested in working through. They feel that there's a disconnect between their training and what they're asked to do on the street. So working proactively to remove police from those arenas, the Cahoots program that Katie mentioned being a great example, where Eugene, Oregon has reduced its police presence around mental health calls by upwards of 90%, I think would go a long way toward building trust between me and the police officers. Second, I organized a series of roundtables because clearly, given the tone of tonight's event and everything I've learned about this group, Melrose Action, there's a disconnect between what the community needs and what the police are offering. And that disconnect is pronounced. The more that we can close that disconnect through conversation, the better. And lastly, I'll just say that I'm eager to talk to people who disagree with me. It's my favorite thing to do. I think it's a result of my Jewish heritage. So, for whatever that's worth, I'm eager to engage directly with the police and all sorts of other stakeholders who vehemently disagree on what the right path forward is.
Scott?
Thank you for the question. I mean, so being a city council member is different than being a state legislator. It's different than being a congressman. There is a legislative component to this job, but there's also an on-the-ground component. And you have to be able to build relationships. That happens at the council member level, you know, with leadership at LAPD and all sorts of agencies, both within our city and in partner cities. And it happens at the staff level, you know, building relationships between senior lead officers and field deputies, and all those kind of relationships are very important to build as well, in terms of our peace officers and all sorts of agencies. So, and that's something I have a great deal of skill with, as evidenced by, you know, my over 150 endorsements from very diverse community leaders, from you know, business improvement district and chamber of commerce leaders, to neighborhood councils, to progressive leaders, to leaders of homeless services providers. And so I have a lot of experience in terms of coalition building, and that's going to be a strong focus of my office.
Great, Molly, we'd love to hear from you, and then we'd love closing statements from everybody.
Yeah, you know, once again, yes, it's about building community, neighbor to neighbor, community, community, small businesses to small businesses, gathering people, knowing our police officers, community and police officer gatherings. I found out, which I didn't know, that we have neighborhoods have beat cops, and I never even knew that. So those things where I would make sure the neighborhoods know who is your police officer in that specific beat, having, once again, meetings that people know these things, education, 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 creating awareness, then we can take action. I love also this, you know, which Peter and I actually organized a few years ago in my neighborhood, with one of those LAPD mobile offices. And we had about 40 people in the community show up, and I brought lemonade, and it was just a really great way to create community, get to know your officers, and, you know, feel safe. And this is sort of an aside because we're all talking about Melrose, but, you know, Fairfax, I was just there today talking to small business owners and how they are struggling up on Fairfax. And I think we need to do an Uplift Fairfax also. And there's so much crime there. And a lot of the businesses there have, you know, there's security at the door. You can't go in and out, which is very sad that we have now a society that we've created that. And it also was an uptick from the civil unrest that happened with the riots. And I will tell you, I think that civil unrest would not have been so bad if our leaders had come out, and I'm talking about city council, mayor, governor, come out and met with the people in Pan Pacific Park, in the big arenas, because people want to be listened to. And civil unrest is about when leaders aren't listening to the people and reaching across the lines, taking their hands and letting them know it's going to be okay, and getting these people also, you know, jobs. Like I keep saying, it's a systemic issue. But in the meantime, yes, police force out and then meeting with the community. So we all feel safe and we know who our law enforcement people are. And more also social workers going out to help the homeless. So it's not just the police officers getting so worn down by things that they don't necessarily have to go out to, that we can get other people to do. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, well, we've gone over time, so I would love to hear closing statements. A minute. Let's start with Katie.
Thank you so much for putting this conversation on tonight. It was a pleasure to be here. As we've talked about, providing for the public safety is the most important thing our government does, and I'm committed to making our communities safer. On issues ranging from violent crime to our unhoused population across the city, to basic issues like making sure our streets are well lit as we walk home. We can all agree that the status quo isn't working. I've never worked in City Hall, but I do know how to navigate government in partnership with community to solve problems. And that's why I'm running. As your council member, I'll leverage my years of policy experience and track record of getting things done, working across jurisdictions to ensure we address both the short-term public safety concerns we talked about tonight that are affecting our community every day, and also put in place smart policies that address the root causes of the issues we discussed. Everyone in the 5th District and across Los Angeles has the right to be safe in our communities, and I will fight to make sure that's a reality. Thank you so much for hosting this tonight, for the opportunity to join you. I would be honored to have the opportunity to earn your vote. For more information, please check out the campaign website. It's katyforla.com, katyforla.com, or you can email me at info@katyforla.com. Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us. Christina, closing thoughts.
Thank you. As your newly elected, hopefully soon to be city council member, I want to reiterate that I will fully fund programs that focus on addressing and resolving the blight in our community in CD5. I am very pro-police, and I want to deter crime because it's horrible what's happening in our cities. You know, I'm not a career politician, so I want to have input from the community. I'm a mom, I'm an immigrant, I'm a woman, I'm a small business owner, I'm a real estate agent locally, you know, so safety is important to me. Obviously, raising my kids in this community, it's important that everybody's kids are safe, not just mine. And I want to reiterate that the police are also important. And don't forget, when we voted, the voters voted to defund the police. It was also to defund them from school campus. What I would like to do is bring them back to the school campuses so that they can start that bond process with the high school kids and, you know, keep them on college campuses. I want to make police activities leagues, a lot of events out there, you know, whether it's Halloween events or something community oriented that you can take the kids to, where there is that neighborhood bond and it builds that trust with the police, the community leaders, our churches, our temples, small businesses, doing everything in sync where we can have a watchful eye, whether it's on the street vendors or whether it's the small businesses, brick and mortars, but we need to make this community safe. And hopefully you will vote for me. Please check out my website at christinairwin.com. Thank you.
Scott, closing thoughts.
Thank you so much for hosting this forum. You know, we all know that we have big problems in this city, and they require bold solutions, and they require civic engagement. If you believe that we need to build a city that's affordable to all, I'm your candidate. If you want to reimagine public safety comprehensively, make sure we're the safest city in the United States, I'm your candidate. If you want compassionate, proactive approach to ending homelessness in Los Angeles, I'm your candidate. And I will say that we can only do it together. That's why I'm proud that this campaign by far has provided the most opportunities for public engagement of any of the campaigns at CD5. So I invite you to go to scottforla.com, check out our events. We do a community walk that we're calling an urban hike every month with a different neighborhood featured. We've been in Melrose and Pico Robertson, Rancho Park, Palms, Westwood, Century City, Persian Square, and December 12th we'll be in Carthay, all three Carthay neighborhoods, talking about a variety of issues, including mobility, homelessness, housing, how we build a more sustainable, vibrant, safe city. So I invite you to engage at scottforla.com. Thanks so much. Bye.
Jimmy, you're up.
Thanks so much for having me. This has been really, really interesting, and I always love talking to my fellow candidates. Tomorrow we're having an event, Beers with Biblars, well named, I know, at All Seasons Brewing on La Brea at 5 p.m. Please come check us out. They're really, really fun. And to get back to the core issue of what we've been talking about all night, a consensus has grown from President Biden to community activists on the ground about how to address crime. Crime cannot be solved through law enforcement alone. Incarceration is a crude tool for dealing with as many social problems as it is asked to answer for. Communities of color and queer people are deeply discriminated against by the police. And community-based violence prevention and intervention in conjunction with robust alternatives to policing in traffic, mental health, and homelessness are the way forward. We must always remember too, 33 people have been killed in LA County this year by the police, the vast majority of whom are people of color. 1 in 1,000 Black men and boys over the course of their life will be killed by a police officer. And I hope that those realities are not lost on any of us tonight. So again, I'm Jimmy Biblars. My website is jimmybiblars.com. My phone number is on the website, as is my email address. Check us out at Beers Tomorrow or shoot me an email or a text.
Thanks, Molly.
Yes, thank you so much for hosting this. Yeah, I am, as I said in my opening statement, I'm born and raised here in Los Angeles, and I am witnessing the demise of this city, our city, right? Our beautiful Los Angeles. And it's gotten worse and worse just in the last 5 years. And that is why I'm running. I too am not a career politician. I am a community organizer, activist, and environmentalist. Another huge tsunami breathing down our necks is the climate crisis. That's why I'm running a green and regenerative campaign. I think it's time that our leaders lead by example, because people see that. People see that what we're doing as leaders, you know, if we're fighting the oil and gas company, but we're using plastic and having that at all our events, it goes against everything that our brothers and sisters are working on in the California Senate to outlaw certain things. So, and as a community organizer, I've gotten things done. I organized the Green Dream campaign, which asked the Democratic Party to live up to their environmental issues that they speak about in their platform. And that's what I do. I organize, I get things done, I get into action. I'm not a politician, which and will remain, you know, the politicians in the status quo keep the gridlock in place because someone is making a lot of money off of these issues. So I am here to serve. I believe in that I am elected as a public servant, and we have forgotten that I am here to serve the people, the planet, and the animals. And I think it's important because we all share this planet together, and it's important that we take care of each other. And so I'm here to do that and create a clean, safe Los Angeles, a green LA, which I say in my campaign video, right? Safety, 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 so we can once again take care of each other and have a thriving, safe city that we all can thrive and live happily. So thank you, Molly, LA2022.com.
Yeah.
Right, Melrose Action, thank you for convening this critical and timely discussion about why homicides are up 1,200% in the Wilshire Division. Frankly, this issue keeps me up at night as a father. These are the issues that I hear every single day when I knock on doors all throughout the 5th Council District. Stories of seniors who are looking over their shoulders when they're out for a walk, moms with strollers being attacked, businesses, schools, churches, synagogues hiring more and more private security because they don't feel safe. Meanwhile, our leaders demonize police officers, but expect them to deal with every single social problem in our city. I love this city, but the status quo isn't working for anyone, especially on the basic, most fundamental issue of public safety. The career politicians of the city and the county are letting us down. They aren't listening to us, or let alone addressing our basic concerns as residents. Frankly, they're too busy illegally enriching themselves through corruption or playing politics with our safety. It's time for new, serious leadership. I will bring my 15 years of private sector experience and nonprofit leadership to deliver real solutions. That's why Congressman Henry Waxman, Supervisor Holly Mitchell, Councilmember Joe Buscaino, and more than 1,100 community leaders throughout the 5th Council District have endorsed our grassroots campaign for change. Please join us at sam4la.com or email me directly at sam@sam4la.com. com. Thank you so much.
Wow, I just want to thank everybody. I mean, you guys are so passionate and so dedicated and so thoughtful. I mean, I'm really just blown away by but how much you care about the city and all of your really interesting and I think really fresh ideas on how to help us out with public safety. I do want to encourage everybody to go to melroseaction.com and sign up for our newsletter. You know, we are a volunteer organization, and please also check out our GoFundMe campaign for license plate reader cameras at GoFundMe Melrose Action. We've been raising money to put some license plate reader cameras around the city, and they're a great tool, and we'd like to help keep the city safe as well. So I just want to thank everybody, and this was really wonderful, and have a great night. Stay safe.
8095, 450. Correction, a female mental, 1508 South Worcester, and the upstairs duplex. Code 2 incident 5401 RD 859.